The three perfect pyramids on the Giza Plateau often overshadow the other unexplained giant pyramids across Egypt. Beyond that familiar silhouette of Giza lies a far stranger landscape, one filled with monuments that resist easy explanation. Across Egypt stand pyramids whose forms, interiors, and histories raise questions that standard narratives struggle to answer. They are massive, precisely engineered monuments whose scale rivals or exceeds the famous examples, yet whose purposes, construction logic, and even ownership remain uncertain. Some of these pyramids appear complete yet empty. Others show evidence of deliberate internal complexity that seems unnecessary for a simple tomb. A few bare scars that suggest catastrophic events, extreme heat, or internal destruction that does not resemble ordinary collapse or decay. These are the pyramids that do not fit comfortably into textbooks, the monuments that raise more questions the closer one looks. The Red Pyramid. Rising in the desert south of Cairo, the Red Pyramid of Djoser is the largest pyramid at the Djoser necropolis and the third largest Egyptian pyramid overall, after the Great Pyramid of Khufu and Khafre's Pyramid at Giza. Its modern nickname comes from the weathered red limestone core that is visible today, although originally this monument was sheathed in brilliant white casing stones that have since been removed, exposing the reddish core beneath. The Red Pyramid stands 105 meters tall with a base about 220 meters wide on each side, giving it a notably squat appearance due to its relatively shallow slope angle of 43 degrees. This slope is much gentler than the angles of earlier pyramids, hence the Red Pyramid's profile looks low and broad compared to pyramids of comparable base size. The choice of this shallower angle was deliberate. It matches the bent pyramid's upper section inclination and was likely aimed at ensuring greater structural stability. As a result, although the Red Pyramid is slightly shorter in height than the Giza pyramids, its base is extraordinarily large, nearly rivaling the Great Pyramid's base, and it contains roughly 1.7 million cubic meters of stone, an immense volume that underscores the ambitious scale of this project. The pyramid's core structure was built primarily of local limestone blocks quarried at Djoser, which have a high iron content that gives them a natural reddish tint once exposed. This reddish core was never meant to be seen in antiquity. It was entirely encased in fine white Tura limestone from across the Nile, so in ancient time the pyramid would have appeared white or light-colored, not red. During the Middle Ages, much of that valuable white casing was pried off for reuse in building projects in Cairo, revealing the red-hued stone beneath. Only a few fragments of the smooth casing remain in place at the base, but based on those, archaeologists know the outer surface was beautifully angled and polished. The pyramid is also aligned very closely with the cardinal directions. Its sides face true north, south, east, and west, which was typical for Egyptian pyramids and required careful surveying. The interior layout of the Red Pyramid is simpler in plan than those of some later pyramids, yet it was an ingenious design for its time. The single entrance lies high on the pyramid's north face, about 28 meters above ground level. From the entrance, a cramped descending passage leads down at a 27-degree angle, burrowing deep into the core of the pyramid. This passage is roughly 1 meter high and almost 1.5 meters wide, just large enough for a person to crouch through, and it extends for about 62 meters in length into the structure. At the end of the steep descent, the passage levels out, opening onto a short, horizontal corridor that leads into the first interior chamber. The first chamber is rectangular in plan and notable for its high corbelled ceiling, which rises about 12 meters above the floor. The corbelled roof is constructed by layering stones so that each higher course projects inward slightly from the one below, narrowing the gap as they ascend. The walls and floor of this chamber were finely finished, yet they bear no inscriptions or adornment. In fact, the entire interior of the Red Pyramid is starkly plain, with no hieroglyphic text or decorative reliefs on the stone. At the south end of the first chamber, there is an opening that leads to the second chamber. The second chamber itself is very similar to the first in size and construction. It lies directly beneath the apex of the pyramid. Unlike the first two chambers, which align lengthwise north-south, the third chamber's long dimension runs east-west. It is also the tallest of the three, with a corbelled ceiling soaring about 15 meters overhead. However, the condition of this chamber is markedly different. The floor here is rough, uneven, and sunk lower than the threshold of the entrance passage. Whereas the first two chambers had level stone floors, the third chamber's floor looks as if a massive pit has been dug into it, and indeed it has. The walls and ceiling are blackened with soot, and there are deep gouges and holes in the lower walls and ground. These are telltale signs of tomb robbers or intruders who broke into the chamber long ago. It appears they dug up the floor, perhaps searching for hidden treasure or a lowered sarcophagus. For centuries after its completion, the Red Pyramid was not frequently entered, as evidenced by the presence of bats and the undisturbed stale air that awaited modern explorers. In fact, local villagers long ago nicknamed it the Bat Pyramid, due to the countless bats roosting in its dark chambers. When 19th century adventurers and Egyptologists finally breached its sealed entrance, they were greeted with an overpowering ammonia odor, the byproduct of ages of bat guano and lack of ventilation. The stench was noted to be almost unbearable and made extended exploration difficult without fresh air. Despite the Red Pyramid's successful construction and impressive interior, it holds many mysteries. Chief among them is that no mummy or definitive funerary treasure was ever found inside. Sneferu's remains are absent, and the chambers were empty of sarcophagi or inscriptions when examined, leaving scholars uncertain whether Sneferu was actually buried here. The lack of any inscriptions or pyramid text on the chamber walls adds to the enigma. The peculiar features and unanswered questions of the Red Pyramid's interior have given rise to a number of alternative theories about its true purpose. While mainstream Egyptology maintains that this pyramid was a tomb, some researchers have suggested it might have had an entirely different function. One elaborate theory posits that the Red Pyramid was not a tomb at all, but a giant chemical reactor or industrial facility, essentially a huge limestone kiln used in a process to produce chemicals like ammonia or niter. Proponents of this idea point to the strong ammonia smell, which they argue is not fully explained by bat guano alone. The blackened, heat-scarred chamber stones, and the perfectly cone-shaped excavation in the floor as evidence of some ancient industrial operation rather than mere tomb robbers. They hypothesize that fires may have been deliberately set inside the chamber to heat limestone and produce chemical reactions. For example, as part of the Solvay process to create sodium carbonate, which involves ammonia. In this view, the so-called burial chamber might actually have been designed as a combustion chamber or a vat. Such theorists also question why Sneferu would build three massive pyramids, Meidum, Bent, and Red, in one reign if they were just tombs, implying perhaps these structures had state-driven practical purposes beyond funerary needs. The Bent Pyramid. The Bent Pyramid stands at Djoser like a deliberate contradiction, a monument that refuses to conform to the clean geometric certainty that defines Egypt's other pyramids. It rises to a height of about 105 meters, with a base measuring roughly 188 meters on each side. Its lower slope rises steeply at about 54 degrees before abruptly shifting to a shallower 43-degree angle halfway up, creating a silhouette that seems almost unstable, as if frozen mid-correction. This sharp bend has sparked debates for more than a century, with theories ranging from engineering mistakes to symbolic architectural choices. Yet the structure's precision, survival, and unique features make the idea of a blunder increasingly unconvincing. Archaeologists often describe the pyramid as an architectural experiment, but many of its construction details are too deliberately refined for simple trial and error. The joints between many blocks are so tight that a sheet of paper can barely slide between them, a level of craftsmanship that suggests careful planning rather than improvisation. The casing stones remain the best preserved of any pyramid in Egypt, making it the only pyramid that still shows its original polished outer shell. This remarkably intact exterior forces researchers to reconsider the notion that the builders lost control of the design. The interior chambers add further complications to the traditional narrative, offering architectural choices that appear highly advanced for the supposed era. The pyramid houses two independent sets of chambers connected by a narrow passage, an arrangement not repeated in later pyramids. Massive wooden beams were placed above one ceiling to relieve pressure, a technique whose sophistication rivals methods used much later in architectural history. The function of these unusual structural decisions remains one of the most intriguing mysteries of the monument. The presence of two entrances, one on the north side and one unusually high on the west side, has been interpreted as evidence of evolving design. However, the chambers accessed by each entrance are completely different in layout and purpose, as if built by separate teams following different plans. Some researchers suggest the pyramid may preserve an older architectural tradition embedded inside a newer one. If so, the pyramid might represent a rare fusion of construction phases rather than a simple mistake corrected mid-build. Another enigma lies in the stunning state of preservation of its casing stones, which appear almost seamlessly fitted. Their polished limestone surface reflects the scale of engineering control required to create a smooth, gleaming facade over an irregular shape. The orientation of the stones and the precision of their angles imply that the bend in the pyramid was not an accidental deviation, but an intentional design choice. The preserved surface allows modern observers to see the pyramid as it once looked, something impossible with the rough, stripped faces of Giza. The pyramid's geometry deepens the puzzle, as the shift in angle occurs at a consistent, mathematically precise elevation. Rather than appearing improvised, the change follows a predictable line, suggesting calculations rather than panic. If the builders truly feared collapse, one might expect hasty reinforcement or uneven adjustments, yet the bend is smooth and elegantly executed. This consistency across all four faces hints that the design may have carried symbolic or functional meaning now lost to time. The pyramid's alignment adds further layers of mystery, as it is slightly off true north in a way that differs from the precise alignments of other pyramids. Some researchers argue this may reflect a now-forgotten alignment system or astronomical target. Others suggest that the orientation was determined by an older, underlying structure or sacred site predating the pyramid. If the builders were adapting to something already on the ground, it could explain both the orientation and the unconventional internal layout. The pyramid's subsidiary structure, the so-called satellite pyramid, also raises questions about its purpose and relationship to the main monument. The satellite pyramid exhibits unusually precise masonry and contains its own interior chambers, indicating more than decorative or symbolic use. The first impression upon entering the bent pyramid is the extreme steepness of the descending corridor, cut precisely at an angle close to 26 degrees and carved into the bedrock with a level of accuracy that suggests advanced planning. This narrow shaft leads into the lower chamber, a space characterized by corbelled vaulting that rises in stepped layers, each stone projecting slightly inward to reduce pressure on the chamber below. The stonework is remarkably tight, with joints so fine that even modern tools would struggle to produce equivalent precision. The lower chamber's corbelled ceiling is composed of several tiers of limestone blocks. The chamber itself is oddly asymmetrical, with its floor and walls showing evidence of different construction stages, reinforcing the idea that the builders were experimenting with structural solutions. Ventilation shafts are absent, which distinguishes this interior from that of the Great Pyramid and suggests a different conceptual purpose. The silence inside the space is profound, as if the geometry naturally dampens sound, producing an acoustic quality that feels intentional rather than incidental. From this chamber, a narrow, steep ascent connects to the upper interior system, creating one of the most striking architectural features of the pyramid: two independent chamber complexes stacked vertically. This dual structure design is unique among Egyptian pyramids and implies a major shift in planning that occurred during construction. The upper chamber mirrors the corbelled style of the lower one, but is more refined and significantly larger, rising in multiple corbel layers that form a lofty, tent-like interior. The Meidum Pyramid. The Pyramid of Meidum is one of the most perplexing monuments in all of Egypt. Named solely for the region in which it stands, it does not carry the inscriptions or royal claims that anchor other pyramids to specific pharaohs. Its present appearance is unsettling, like the exposed core of a body stripped of its outer form, a ruin that invites a kind of architectural autopsy. While the Great Pyramids of Giza, Saqqara, and Abu Sir cluster together in stately groups, Meidum stands alone on the edge of cultivated land, isolated both geographically and historically. Its exterior has been so thoroughly ruined that only a strange, truncated tower of inner structure remains, with bands of construction exposed in the upper section that hint at a complex history of expansion and modification. One of the strangest facts about Meidum is that it appears to be the only completed pyramid in Egypt never officially claimed by a pharaoh. This absence has created enormous room for debate. Some argue that the pyramid was never fully finished, but whatever may have been left undone would have been minor compared to the scale of the work already completed. Despite its battered exterior and neglected reputation, the Meidum Pyramid contains crucial clues about the evolution of Egyptian engineering and the experimental process that led to the monumental perfection of later pyramids. Beneath the destruction and decay lies a deeply underappreciated mystery that modern Egyptology has still not fully addressed. The most immediate question visitors ask is what caused the pyramid to end up in such a state. For much of the 20th century, scholars propose that Meidum suffered a structural failure even before it was completed, and the enormous rubble heap surrounding its base was interpreted as evidence of a sudden and catastrophic collapse. However, this explanation becomes weaker when we consider the extensive quarrying that took place over many centuries. Meidum sits unusually close to farmland and human settlement, which made it an extremely convenient source of stone for later building projects. Unlike Giza or Djoser, where the Tura limestone casing stones were selectively stripped, Meidum appears to have been mined almost indiscriminately across its entire exterior. This extensive human interference makes it more likely that the structure failed gradually as its outer shell was removed, with weather and gravity doing the rest. The pyramid is generally attributed to Sneferu, the first king of Egypt's 4th dynasty and the father of Khufu. Yet this attribution is not absolutely certain, because the pyramid contains no inscriptions, no dedicatory texts, and no clear evidence linking it definitively to Sneferu. The assumption is based on later inscriptions nearby and parallels in architectural style. According to mainstream chronology, however, Sneferu had already built both the Bent Pyramid and the Red Pyramid by the time Meidum was transformed. Returning to an older monument to redesign it again does not fit comfortably with a simple linear narrative of trial and error. The current height of the pyramid is 65 meters, 213 feet, but archaeologists estimate that during its golden age, its height reached 93 meters, around 300 feet. Some architectural choices may have contributed to its vulnerability. Meidum began as a stepped pyramid, built in layers leaning inward at about 75 degrees, and only later was transformed into a true smooth-sided pyramid. The smooth casing stones had already been added to the earlier step stages before the final outer layer was built, which meant the last enlargement could not be properly bonded into a single coherent mass. That weakness may have made the outer shell more susceptible to collapse once quarrying began. Much of what we know about Meidum comes from late 19th and early 20th century archaeologists. Flinders Petrie is especially important because he uncovered the small mortuary temple attached to the eastern face of the pyramid. This modest structure is now considered the oldest fully intact building in the world. The contrast between the temple's perfect preservation and the devastation of the pyramid itself is striking. The temple survived only because it was deeply buried under debris, shielded from quarrying and weather. Petrie describes working beneath walls of loose rubble as high as a London house, with storms whipping sand into choking whirlwinds while stones rattled down in avalanches. After finally exposing the temple, he measured it carefully, photographed it, copied all its details, and then did something unusual for his time. He reburied it. He understood that leaving it open would guarantee its destruction within months, given that the Meidum Pyramid was being used as a quarry by local inhabitants. Within the temple are 2 large uninscribed stelae, an extraordinary feature that deepens the uncertainty around the pyramid's ownership. Their lack of inscriptions is one reason why modern scholars find it difficult to assign Meidum definitively to a particular king. Today, high-resolution imaging or radiographic techniques might detect faint traces of paint or preliminary markings invisible to the eye, but long exposure to sun and weather has likely erased much of this evidence. The internal design of Meidum was clarified by Gerald Wainwright and Ludwig Borchardt. Borchardt later showed that the monument was built in 3 major stages. The first, called E1, was a 7-step pyramid. The second, E2, extended it to 8 steps. The final stage, E3, transformed it into a true pyramid with a face angle of about 52.6 degrees, almost identical to that of the Great Pyramid. This means Meidum began as a classic step pyramid, then was enlarged, and only later was wrapped in a smooth casing of fine limestone blocks. The entrance to the pyramid lies high on the north face, about 18 meters above ground, similar in elevation to the original entrance of the Great Pyramid. The descending passage from this entrance is tall enough for a person to walk almost upright, unlike many other Old Kingdom pyramids where visitors must stoop or crawl. After about 10 meters, the corridor passes from the E3 construction into the earlier E2 layer. The vertical shaft connecting the lower system to the upper chamber is one of Meidum's most intriguing features. It is roughly a meter square and about 6.5 meters high, and traces on its walls show that it was once lined with thinner slabs of limestone. Unlike the iconic silhouettes of Egypt's smooth-sided pyramids, Meidum appears today as a massive, steep tower rising from a ring of chaotic rubble, a profile so strange that travelers for centuries were unsure whether they were looking at a pyramid at all. Its bizarre shape, the immense debris field that surrounds it, and the unanswered questions about its sudden collapse make the Meidum Pyramid one of the greatest architectural mysteries of the ancient world. The Black Pyramid. South of Saqqara, directly east of the bent pyramid of Sneferu, stands the Black Pyramid of Djoser, a structure unlike any other monument of the Old Kingdom, not only because of its unusual appearance, but because of the questions it raises about engineering, purpose, and the cause of its destruction. It was once encased in fine white limestone like other pyramids, yet today it appears dark, collapsed, and almost melted into the desert. The name Black Pyramid comes from this ruined state, where the exposed mud brick core and fractured stone give it a charred, shadowy look. Originally, the pyramid would have been a brilliant white landmark dominating the Giza Plateau, reflecting sunlight. Its base measured roughly 105 meters per side, and experts think the pyramid stood at 75 meters in height, but the exact measurement is not known. This uncertainty arises from debates over the angle of the pyramid's sides. Casing stone fragments show angles ranging from 54 to 57 degrees, but it is unclear how these stones were laid. Some researchers have proposed that the Black Pyramid once had a far more dramatic appearance, possibly showing signs of heat alteration or surface deformation. According to this alternative theory, the pyramid's darkened material and fractured core are not simply the result of erosion or collapse. Instead, they argue that extreme heat, possibly from a catastrophic event, altered the structure's materials at a molecular level. In this view, parts of the pyramid appear almost vitrified, as if exposed to temperatures far beyond those produced by ordinary fires. Supporters of the melting hypothesis point to the unusual texture of the debris surrounding the pyramid. Certain fragments appear warped or fused together in ways that do not resemble standard structural failure. They argue that simple gravitational collapse would have produced cleaner breaks and more uniform rubble. Instead, the remains look chaotic, compressed, and in places strangely sintered, suggesting intense thermal stress. This interpretation often extends into broader theories of prehistoric cataclysms affecting Egypt at the end of a forgotten epoch. Proponents suggest the Black Pyramid may preserve physical evidence of a destructive event involving heat, pressure, and possibly water. They believe that internal temperatures could have risen dramatically, perhaps due to chemical reactions, sealed chambers, or unknown processes taking place inside. In this scenario, the monument predates its conventional dating and was already ancient when later dynasties encountered it. Its ruined condition would then be the result of forces far beyond the engineering errors described by mainstream archaeology. These ideas remain speculative and are not accepted by mainstream archaeology. The official explanation, however, is far more conservative and grounded in dynastic chronology. According to Egyptology, the Black Pyramid was built during the reign of Pharaoh Amenemhat III of the 12th dynasty. It is understood as an ambitious but ultimately flawed construction that suffered from poor material choices and structural instability. The mud brick core, combined with a heavy limestone casing, proved unable to support its own weight over time. Later on, Ramses the Great stripped the pyramid of its casing stone, using it for construction, suggesting the pyramid was already in ruin even then. Yet even within the official framework, the pyramid remains deeply unusual. Its internal design is far more complex than earlier Old Kingdom pyramids, featuring multiple corridors, chambers, and blocking systems. These elements suggest an advanced understanding of structural mechanics and internal planning. The internal chambers descend deep beneath the pyramid rather than rising within the body of the structure. This subterranean emphasis is striking and suggests a different conceptual approach to monument design. Rather than elevating the main chamber toward the sky, the architects embedded it within the earth itself. The entrance leads into descending passages that twist and turn before reaching the main chamber. These corridors were deliberately narrow and carefully angled. At the heart of the pyramid lies the central chamber, constructed entirely of massive granite blocks. Inside this chamber sits a huge granite box that mainstream archaeologists label as a sarcophagus. There are multiple granite and alabaster boxes as well, all showing extreme precision and possibly machine drill marks. Perhaps the most precise granite box found anywhere in the world is the one discovered beneath the Black Pyramid. There, inside a chamber made of polished, curved granite stones, we find this remarkable tilted granite box that is perfectly flat along the top side. When researchers measured the four corners of the box with modern equipment, they were stunned to find that they are near identical. One of the most important discoveries associated with the Black Pyramid is its pyramidion, found in October 1900. This pyramidion slopes at an angle of 54 degrees, closely matching the lower range of casing stone angles. It was discovered in the ruined pyramid temple rather than on the pyramid itself. This immediately raises questions about whether it ever crowned the monument. When comparing the pristine condition of the pyramidion to the ruined state of the pyramid, the discrepancy is striking. The pyramidion remains smooth, sharply defined, and remarkably well preserved. If it had sat atop the pyramid for centuries, exposed to wind and sand, it should show significant erosion, yet it does not. The Step Pyramid of Djoser. At the heart of Saqqara stands the Pyramid of Djoser, one of the most remarkable and mysterious structures ever built in ancient Egypt. Often regarded as the first stone pyramid, many of its architectural features feel out of place for its supposed era, as if the builders had inherited knowledge unfamiliar to the time or adapted an already ancient platform left by an earlier culture. The sudden shift from simple mud brick mastabas to a gigantic multi-level stone monument seems abrupt and unexplained, almost as though the structure represented a revival or continuation of techniques not fully understood by later Egyptians. Unlike the straightforward pyramids that followed, Djoser's monument resembles an entire sacred city, containing hidden tunnels, sealed chambers, false entrances, deep shafts, and enormous courtyards that defy simplistic interpretation. The pyramid is 60 meters tall and has 121 meter length and 109 meter width. Rather than being conceived as a single unified plan, the monument appears to have grown through several expansions. At its earliest phase, it seems to have begun as a large, square platform, similar to earlier mastabas, but on a far greater scale. Then it was enlarged, extended, and raised multiple times until it achieved its final six-tiered form. Each expansion encased the previous layer, suggesting that the builders either altered their intentions repeatedly or were modifying a structure that already existed. The reasons for these expansions remain unknown. If the monument was designed from the outset as a multi-tiered stone mountain, why create so many concealed layers beneath the final visible form? If instead the builders were modifying a much older monument, the progressive enlargements make more sense. Each dynasty or cultural group could have enhanced or reinterpreted the structure according to its own needs, traditions, or symbolic purposes. Surrounding the step pyramid is a massive limestone wall over 10 meters high, with 14 false gateways carved into it. Only one gateway actually opens into the interior. The others are carefully sculpted illusions of entry leading nowhere. Their placement around the perimeter suggests ritual, astronomical, or symbolic significance rather than functional architecture. These false doors create the impression that the enclosure was meant to be accessed not by physical beings, but by something else, perhaps a symbolic, ceremonial, or metaphysical counterpart to physical existence. The idea that such an enormous complex would include dozens of non-functional features hints at a lost worldview, one that placed tremendous importance on the interplay between physical architecture and non-physical meaning. It is difficult to imagine such effort being expended unless the builders were following a tradition far older than the dynastic period or reenacting a symbolic landscape inherited from a forgotten era. Beneath its six-tiered limestone structure lies a labyrinth of tunnels, chambers, and shafts stretching for more than 5 kilometers, forming one of the most intricate underground complexes ever created in antiquity. These tunnels, hewn into the bedrock nearly 30 meters below ground, represent a level of architectural sophistication that even later pyramids would not surpass. At their heart lies a chamber, constructed from massive granite blocks, encased deep within a vertical shaft 28 meters deep and 7 meters wide. Surrounding it is a network of 400 interconnected rooms and corridors, some lined with polished limestone and decorated with delicate blue faience tiles. Archaeologists believe that these tunnels served both practical and symbolic functions. The layout was deliberately complex, a maze meant to confuse intruders and protect the burial chamber from tomb robbers. One of the most astonishing discoveries in Djoser's tunnels came from the south galleries, long corridors extending hundreds of meters away from the burial shaft. These passages contained more than 40,000 stone vessels. During modern excavations, archaeologists found alabaster vessels, wooden coffins, skeletal remains, and fragments of tools left behind by workers who built the complex. Some tunnels appear unfinished, suggesting that the builders expanded or modified the design over time. The lower passages reveal niches and shafts leading to secondary chambers, possibly used to bury royal family members or high priests. Several of these tunnels were sealed with massive limestone blocks, requiring extraordinary precision and coordination to install, an engineering challenge even by modern standards. Recent restoration projects have allowed researchers to re-enter parts of the subterranean labyrinth that were previously too unstable to explore. High-resolution 3D mapping has shown that the tunnels form an intentional geometric pattern, radiating outward from the burial shaft like the spokes of a wheel. Some corridors align with astronomical orientations, linking the underground network to celestial movements above, further evidence that the entire pyramid complex functioned as a symbolic model of the cosmos. The south tomb, located at the far end of the enclosure wall, adds another layer of mystery. It contains a miniature version of the main burial chamber, complete with its own blue-tiled room and granite sarcophagus. The fact that both the main burial shaft and the south tomb replicate each other suggests a deliberate dualism. Even today, much of Djoser's subterranean labyrinth remains unexcavated or inaccessible, blocked by collapsed sections and unstable ceilings. Yet what has been revealed demonstrates that the builders of Egypt's first pyramid already possessed the full conceptual and technical mastery that later culminated in the Great Pyramid of Giza. Every chamber, corridor, and shaft beneath Djoser's pyramid was cut with intent, a physical and spiritual map of eternity. The Menkaure Pyramid. The Pyramid of Menkaure is the smallest of the three famous pyramids at Giza, originally rising to around 65 meters tall. It stands on the southwestern corner of the Giza Plateau in alignment with its larger neighbors, oriented with precise cardinal directions. Despite its lesser size, the pyramid complex displays remarkable architectural sophistication and preserves invaluable evidence about pyramid construction methods for modern scholars. The pyramid's core is built from locally quarried limestone and occupies a much smaller base area than the colossal pyramids of Khufu and Khafre, covering only about a quarter of their footprint. Uniquely, Menkaure's builders used massive pink granite blocks from Aswan to sheathe the lower 15 meters of the pyramid's exterior, while the upper courses were intended to be cased in fine white Tura limestone. These two materials would have given the pyramid a striking two-toned appearance. The precision of the granite exterior is evident in the way the casing blocks were cut, positioned, and aligned despite the extreme hardness of the material. The joints between surviving blocks are narrow and regular, indicating careful measurement and controlled placement rather than rough stacking. Recently, one of the granite outer sections of the pyramid was scanned with electrical resistivity tomography, ground-penetrating radar, and ultrasonic testing. The results showcase that there are hidden voids beneath the granite blocks, proving there are still undiscovered mysteries inside the pyramid. The entrance to Menkaure's pyramid is on the north face, approximately 4 meters above the original ground level. From this portal, a steep descending passageway leads downward at about a 26-degree angle through the masonry and into the bedrock beneath the monument. The beginning of the passage was lined in part with pink granite, a feature likely meant to strengthen the corridor and perhaps impress the visitor with costly stone from the very threshold of the tomb. After descending some 31 meters, the corridor opens into an unusual chamber decorated with a series of recessed panel carvings along its walls, resembling the niched facade of a palace. This chamber with carved panels is an architectural rarity inside a pyramid. The purpose of this ornamented chamber is still not fully understood. Proceeding past the decorated room, a short horizontal passage continues and eventually leads into a large rectangular chamber often referred to as the antechamber. This room lies directly under the pyramid's central vertical axis and is oriented east-west, measuring significantly larger than the earlier passageway sections. Notably, there is evidence of an alteration in the entry system to this chamber. From the center of the antechamber, the burial route takes another turn. A square opening was cut into the floor, giving access to a further descending passage that continues toward the actual burial chamber. This lower passage first slopes down and then straightens out horizontally as it approaches the final chamber. Just before the burial chamber, along this horizontal stretch, the architects created an antechamber annex often referred to as the cellar or niche room. In this space, 6 deep niches were carved into the walls. The function of these 6 niches has been the subject of debate among Egyptologists. At the terminus of the lower passage lies the actual burial chamber, cut deep into the bedrock, approximately 16 meters below the base of the pyramid. Unlike the roughly east-west oriented burial chambers of Khufu and Khafre, Menkaure's burial chamber is oriented north-south along its length. This chamber was expertly constructed entirely from granite. In 1837, when British explorers Colonel Howard Vyse and J. Paring managed to penetrate into these lower chambers, they discovered a remarkable sarcophagus inside the granite burial chamber. Sadly, this precious sarcophagus never reached a museum. It was loaded on a ship bound for England in 1838, but the vessel sank in the Mediterranean, and the sarcophagus was lost at sea. We know its appearance today only from Vyse's drawings and notes. To the south of the Menkaure Pyramid, there are three small subsidiary pyramids as part of the pyramid complex. These are commonly known as the Queen's Pyramids, though their exact purposes are debated. All three are much smaller than the King's Pyramid and stand in a row adjacent to its base, forming a harmonized grouping on the southwest side of the Giza Plateau. The Great Breach visible on the Pyramid of Menkaure is one of the most drastic human-inflicted damage occurred in the medieval period. During the 12th century AD, the second Ayyubid Sultan of Egypt, Al-Malik al-Aziz Othman, son of the famous Saladin, attempted to demolish the Giza pyramids, beginning with Menkaure's pyramid since it was the smallest and presumably easiest target. According to historical accounts, Al-Aziz's workers labored for some 8 months trying to tear it apart, but they found the task nearly insurmountable. They managed to inflict a massive vertical gash on the pyramid's north face, prying out stones and leaving a deep cleft in the masonry that is still visible today. However, the pyramid's construction was so robust that the effort was ultimately abandoned. The workers could remove some stones but could not induce a total collapse. This unsightly gash remains a conspicuous scar on Menkaure's pyramid, reminding us of the enduring strength of the ancient structure. Taken together, the unknown pyramids of Egypt reveal a civilization far less rigid and far more experimental than it is usually portrayed. Their varied geometries, unusual internal layouts, and recurring absence of clear funerary evidence suggest that pyramid building was not governed by a single fixed doctrine, but by evolving ideas whose meanings have largely been lost. These monuments show deliberate planning, mathematical control, and engineering foresight, with anomalies pointing to purposes that extended beyond simple burial. What ultimately makes these pyramids so compelling is not that they contradict mainstream archaeology, but that they expose its limits. Until those structures are approached without the assumption that their purpose is already known, they will continue to appear incomplete or misunderstood. In that sense, the greatest mystery is not what these pyramids were used for, but how much ancient knowledge may still be hidden in plain sight, waiting to be recognized rather than explained away. Long before recorded history, there were advanced ancient civilizations capable of building gigantic megalithic structures we can't build today. Lifting enormous stone blocks weighing thousands of tons and stacking them with laser-like precision. Blocks we still struggle to lift even with our modern cranes. They crafted mathematically precise, flawless monuments from the hardest stone on Earth, leaving us to wonder who these builders were and how they accomplished the impossible. Were they merely primitive societies, or were they masters of a forgotten technology lost to the sands of time? Uncover the evidence of an ancient, global, and technologically sophisticated civilization that once ruled over our planet, constructing gigantic sites the ruins of which are still standing, before a cataclysmic event erased it from memory. Access our eBook, Prehistoric Megastructures, a nearly 500-page volume packed with images and in-depth analysis of some of the most astonishing and unexplained ancient structures ever discovered, monuments that were clearly built with advanced technology from a time long forgotten. There's a limited discount on the ebook, so make sure to get yours before it's too late.